The Chinese leader Xi Jinping is trying to win the hearts and minds of Taiwan, Macau, and Hong Kong. The goal is to reunify China. U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi arrived in Taiwan today. China threatened to shoot down her plane if she did, but she stood up to them. Thousands of UK firms are cutting ties with China. Both candidates for UK's next Prime Minister explained how they would stand up to China. More than 200 students attended a fake school in China. Parents warn about the dangers of listening to false propaganda. China is digging a new tunnel in Xinjiang. It's likely to test nuclear bombs underground. Finally, Twitter uncensored the English Epoch Times newspaper after a public outcry. Let's get into it. Welcome to Sound of Hope News. My name is Daniela Wolensack, and today is August 2nd. The Chinese president demanded the United Front Work Department reach out to patriotic forces both at home and overseas. The group plays an important role in safeguarding national sovereignty. The Chinese president emphasized that the work should, quote, strike the right balance between commonality and diversity. He is referring to the relations between these areas and China. It was also required to win the hearts and minds of people in Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan, as well as overseas Chinese, state-run news agency Xinhua reported. 3 years ago, Beijing cracked down on Hong Kong's freedoms, sparking mass pro-democracy protests in the city. In 2020, China introduced a wide-ranging national security law for Hong Kong, making it easier to prosecute protesters and reduce the city's autonomy. Taiwan has been a self-governed island since 1949, but Beijing claims it as its own territory and vows to unify. Beijing has never officially governed it, however. Political scientist at the Australian National University's Taiwan Studies program, Wen Ti-sung, pointed out that the Chinese president's nod to the importance of the United Front in Taiwan may signal Beijing's preference for long-term, peaceful approaches when it comes to its professed goal of reunification. He said, "It shows in a very subtle way that in spite of all the heated rhetoric out there, Beijing has got to show some patience here," according to CNN. In recent years, the United Front's operations, including the Overseas Chinese Affairs Office, have drawn international attention amid growing concerns about China's bid for global reach. The department has raised the suspicions of overseas governments for co-opting ethnic Chinese people and other individuals, silencing dissent, cracking down on certain religious and other ethnic groups, and practicing foreign influence functions. The U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's delegation has just arrived in Taiwan today. They finished a 2-day visit to Singapore yesterday and were supposed to go to Malaysia. Her official itinerary technically omits Taiwan. Beijing itself ordered her to stay away from Taiwan, but she defied their orders. She is set to meet with Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen and legislators in the self-ruled democracy tomorrow. Pelosi said in a statement shortly after landing, "Our congressional delegation's visit to Taiwan honors America's unwavering commitment to supporting Taiwan's vibrant democracy. America's solidarity with the 23 million people of Taiwan is more important today than ever, as the world faces a choice between autocracy and democracy." The former director of the U.S. Department of Defense Office of China, Taiwan, and Mongolia, Drew Thompson, commented on the current situation. While Pelosi's itinerary excludes Taiwan, the congressional delegation can still stop in there on an unofficial basis. This approach is in line with the One China policy of the United States. According to the French Broadcasting Corporation, the delegation plans to stay in Taipei for 1 night before traveling to Malaysia, South Korea, and Japan. The individuals scheduled to meet with Pelosi have all been informed of her imminent arrival. The details of the visit are yet to be finalized. Those meeting Pelosi will include, but are not limited to, government officials. On August 1st, for the first time, the White House publicly expressed support for Pelosi's Taiwan visit. The White House's statement indicated that Pelosi has the right to decide for herself which countries she will visit. U.S. Secretary of State Blinken stated that he hopes China will act responsibly and not escalate tensions. If China creates a crisis over the visit, the consequences and accountability will rest entirely on Beijing. British businesses are cutting ties with China in the wake of increased political and security tensions between Beijing and the West. The Confederation of British Industry Director General Tony Danker told Financial Times that thousands of companies are rethinking their supply chains in ways that could exacerbate the cost of living crisis. And they anticipate that, quote, our politicians will inevitably accelerate toward a decoupled world from China. China was Britain's biggest source of imported goods in 2021, accounting for 13% of the total, while it was the sixth largest destination for goods exports, according to Britain's official trade statistics. Danker commented on the severe economic ties with China and said, it doesn't take a genius to think cheap goods and cheaper goods may be a thing of the past. He warned that price rises were inevitable. The CBI boss said Britain needs new strategic alliances in the world as tensions rise with China. One ally could be the European Union. Last week, China became a foreign policy battleground between the two final contenders in the race to become UK Prime Minister. Foreign Secretary Liz Truss stated that she'll continue to toughen the UK's position on China and help lead, quote, the international response to increased Chinese aggression. Former Chancellor Rishi Sunak promised to close all 30 Confucius Institutes in the UK. Confucius Institutes are controversial Beijing-backed language and cultural learning centers. Both Truss and Sunak have pledged to curb the threat posed by the Chinese regime to the UK's national security and economic security. More than 200 students in Hebei, China, attended a fake high school called Hujiatuan High School. The news sparked a buzz on Sina Weibo on July 30th. Hujiatuan High School charged them a so-called guaranteed education agreement, which cost 8,000 yuan a year. The agreement offered to refund half the money if students didn't qualify for university and to send them to a state-run secondary education. Later, the education at the high school turned out to be so shabby that every student was rejected by universities. But the fake high school refused to return the money and left the students without secondary education. On July 28th, angry parents lined up at the entrance of Hebei Huina Education Investment Cooperation Limited to refund their fees. The parents angrily complained that none of their students had made it into university. The parents reminded the students to be skeptical of false propaganda and to avoid enrollment traps. According to Sina Weibo, Liu Zhuo, a pseudonym, who lives in Hebei province, failed to get into their ideal high school in 2019. Their middle school teachers recommended this high school. Over the past 3 years, more than 200 students, including Liu Zhuo, were transferred to different schools in Linshou County and Gaocheng District of Shijiazhuang City under the arrangement of Wella Education. In their sophomore year, some of the students discovered that the Hujiatuan High School somehow hadn't registered them, causing problems later on. In the third year of senior high school, in the mock exam organized by Shijiazhuang, the students did not have any test papers. For the 2022 college entrance exams, most students score 200 or 300, too low to be entered into college, as the minimum score to go to college in China is 378. Nihon Keizai Shimbun reported that the latest satellite photos show that the Chinese Communist Party is expanding its nuclear test facilities in the Xinjiang region. This was on July 31st. Experts from American think tanks said raising the CCP's nuclear arsenal would likely be part of its strategy to invade Taiwan. The location is near Lap Nur, a dry salt lake in southeastern China's Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. The photos were taken by private satellite imaging company Planet Labs, PBC. They showed new buildings under construction. On the mountainside in the Xinjiang desert area, a large area has been covered, and a huge amount of gravel was piled up nearby. It is speculated that this is the sixth tunnel being dug for an underground nuclear weapons test. The site has also recently installed electrical transport cables and facilities that can be used to store high explosives. Unpaved white roads lead in all directions from the command post. According to the report, the CCP has conducted 5 underground nuclear tests in the Lopmer area, the last being China's 45th nuclear explosion test in 1996. The construction of the sixth tunnel is likely to confirm that China's nuclear weapons program may resume. At a conference hosted by the Washington-based think tank Defense Priorities, former U.S. Naval War College professor Lyle Goldstein said that China's expansion of its nuclear arsenal is likely part of its strategy to invade Taiwan. Twitter censored all links to English and Spanish versions of the Epoch Times on the evening of July 28th. It was uncensored 2 days later after a public outcry. At the time, links to the Epoch Times webpage led to a page marked "Warning, this link may not be safe," which prompts the user to return to the previous page. The Epoch Times media group was founded in 2000 by Chinese Americans who fled mainland China. They are trying to create independent media that brings uncensored, truthful information to the world. Although operating outside of China, the Epoch Times has been the target of the Chinese regime for the past 20 years. Several U.S. lawmakers, including Senator Marco Rubio, have condemned Twitter's efforts to block the Epoch Times. The #1 Republican on the Senate Intelligence Committee, Rubio, demanded that Twitter, quote, explain itself for this outrageous act of censorship. Republican Senator Ron Johnson and Rick Scott also criticized Twitter's approach to the Epoch Times. Thank you so much for listening. If you like what you saw, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. See you tomorrow.